Yo, what is up, my quarren queens? Let's have news. Some more of it. Disney's Marvel's Fox's The New Mutants is coming out in theaters, and boy are we excited to see the movie that started filming 3 years ago. Now in theaters, still planned to be released this August 28th in physical theaters. And in other totally not related news, the coronavirus might be a smidge airborne, as researchers have managed to detect the virus from aerosols collected up to 16 feet from COVID patients. It's not yet peer-reviewed, so don't freak out on your pets or whatever, but you know, something to be concerned about. But also, unrelated, two unrelated news stories. Also, there's an election in like a few months, which I guess is more important than the New Mutants, I guess. And maybe, just perhaps, we should try to help people not die while voting, but also vote. Just like how it would be nice to not die while seeing The New Mutants, a film everyone is definitely excited for, and perhaps could watch on some kind of, like a digital medium that I guess doesn't exist. Luckily for voting, however, we do have an extremely helpful alternative to physically going out and waiting in line and standing in a weird booth while surrounded by the aged and agitated. And that alternative is mail-in voting, a thing we have been doing since the Civil War. So yeah, it sure seems like this shouldn't be an issue then. Unlike the impossible task of seeing movies in our homes, we have a really common system in place for the event of voting during a pandemic. You know, assuming we continue to have the extremely popular and widespread United States Postal Service, a thing that, as I just said, is extremely popular and important for this and pretty much every country. We made a whole movie about the importance of the post office, and it was unwatchable, unlike The New Mutants, which is going to be so watchable that it might kill you. So now that I've established the mail-in voting and the post office and how they're extremely helpful, popular, and perfect for the pandemic, it's only natural to talk about how Trump and the GOP absolutely hate it and want it to stop existing, because they always seem to do the wrong thing. It's very cute of them to keep doing that. And this isn't new news. We're all talking about it right now, and whether or not we need to be panicked, and what this means for the election, and whether or not Trump is trying to undermine it. And we had a whole Senate hearing about this that no one watched, and a ton of Twitter misinformation, and whole bunches of very smart people telling us that we're overreacting. And I guess this video is to sort through it all, and put everything in its proper cubby of truth. Something that the USPS is actually going to have some trouble with now. But first, a little word from our president.
And when you have this mail-in voting, it's very susceptible. It's something that can be easily attacked by foreign countries and by, frankly, Democrats and by Republicans. And I think that it's something you have to start thinking about very seriously. Our system's not equipped for it. The post office is not equipped for it, and people should vote like they did in World War I and World War II.
Oh yeah, let's vote like it's World War II, folks. We love that World War II voting, and a lot of other things from then too. Why can't America be like it was during World War II? When, by the way, a whole lot of overseas soldiers voted through the mail. So, what the f*** is he even talking about? Also, and I feel like we're long past this fact, but I guess I'll say it, there has been no evidence of significant voter fraud through mail-in ballots. Like, go ahead and Google that if you're having trouble. Bing it if you're nasty. If you need any more dismantling of our good president's smart words about mail-in voting, just look at the fact that he wholeheartedly supports it when it's done in states likely to vote for him. Because it turns out that voting by mail actually helps Republicans just as much as it can help Democrats, and it's a totally non-partisan solution. Like, who do you think benefits the most in a state like Florida, where old people would be able to mail in their ballots? It's so weird and transparent and desperate that I can't believe I have to talk about it. But I do. Because Trump is the president for some reason, and if he loses in November, he's going to blame the mail, like an old coot. And his loser supporters, who are losers whether or not he wins in November, but also they're more than welcome on the right side of history anytime, folks. But anyway, those losers will gobble it up like a hot turd pie. even though the only thing hurting his chances of getting mail-in votes is him and his weird beef with it that seems to go against his own party, who is desperately trying to catch up with Democrats' push for this extremely easy voting option. It's going to be insufferable and might possibly cripple our country as this weird battle with mail-in voting greatly affects our US Postal Service, which, I don't know if you know this, isn't doing great right now and hasn't been doing great for a while, even though, again, wildly popular. And that's mostly what I want to talk about. Because while we're all very concerned about the obvious attacks by Trump on mail-in voting and how it relates to the USPS, it's not the only thing going on here. The survival of the post office isn't just extremely important to anyone who isn't a rich person, but oddly complicated as well, and spans decades of decisions that happened long before the internet threatened mail delivery. Let's start at the top with Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, a man who looks like he's definitely hiding some kind of monstrous kink, and that kink is probably f***ing over the post office. Not to shame or anything, but he looks super horny for ruining trusted American institutions. And despite having zero background in the Postal Service, he was appointed by our president just this year. But technically not by our president, but also sorta by him, and we'll get to that. This started mid-June. And exactly 1 month later began cutting costs, causing massive delays in delivery and also sparking accusations that the USPS was deliberately slowing down mail to give preferential treatment to Amazon, a company that, and this is real life, Louis DeJoy purchased stock options for right as he was appointed to his position. DeJoy and his wife also own assets in several other USPS competitors like the UPS trucking company J.B. Hunt, as well as the Postal Service contractor XPO Logistics. And like, are you even surprised? This has been the entire smash and grab we told you about with the Trump administration, where our very smart business president of deals hires other rich people to hold positions long enough to get even more rich and then bounce. And yes, if you're wondering, our pal Louis DeJoy is a top GOP fundraiser for Trump. Yay, who cares? Nothing matters. That's not true. That's not true. Something matters. And that something is nothing. Anyway, that company, XPO Logistics, the one whose name I just said before, they actually bought up a smaller company in 2014 called New Breed Logistics, of which DeJoy was the CEO. See, because he has a business background, a big boy degree in business administration that makes him super qualified to run the post office. And I guess like logistics helps, so there's like logistics for that. I don't know. Anyway, over at XPO Logistics and or New Breed Logistics, they believe in such wonderful job creating techniques as automation and $1.5 million settled in a sexual harassment lawsuit and paying $41 million in wage violations, and most importantly, miscarriages. As in 3 employees suffering miscarriages in their warehouse after having their doctor's note asking for lighter duties being ignored by supervisors. That's our guy in charge of the mail, who just reassigned and displaced 23 postal executives as a measure to, quote, realign the organization to provide greater focus on the core aspects of our business and to give us a better chance for future success. You know, our business, the post office, which has the primary goal to make money, is definitely the goal of the post office. Like when we think of the post office, we definitely think business and not service. And we'll get to that in a bit because we have to, because my goodness. But first, we need to address just what the heck is happening here. Because I don't want to jump to any wild conclusions, but it sure seems like the United States president just hired a weird little corporate gargoyle with money ties to private delivery companies to deliberately sabotage the US Postal Service and, by extension, democracy. And while there's a little bit of debate about whether or not these types of shakeups are business as usual, the overall reaction coming from our mail carriers has been alarm and concern. For example, it sure doesn't seem to be business as usual or cost cutting when post offices are reporting that their sorting equipment is being taken away at alarmingly high levels, a measure that would only exist to purposefully undermine mail delivery in exchange for cost cutting, which is now delaying the mail, which according to one Postal Workers Union president is actually costing more money in man hours than it is saving, and thus not even doing the cost cutting as well as it should. According to one memo sent out to employees, one aspect of these changes that may be difficult for employees is that temporarily we may see mail left behind or mail on the workroom floor or docks. But hey, that's just like paper and cards and rotting food and also important medication for United States veterans that's now being delayed and endangering the lives of people who fought in bad wars for our country. No biggie. It's just some dead baby chicks, thousands of them. You know, just a few unintended consequences of firing a bunch of postal executives and removing sorting machines. Who could have seen it coming? So yeah, sure seems like fetish boy DeJoy might be undermining the post office to sway people against mail-in voting, or at the very least is functioning as if the post office is supposed to be a business, which it isn't, but also, for some reason, technically is, but also, boners. This just in, sorta, not really. It turns out that we're all wrong for doubting him, and Postmaster To Joy has just announced that he will be suspending all of his shady new changes until after the election, quelling all fears that Trump will try to interfere with the election mail. Never mind, everyone! End of video, I guess. I mean, he absolutely won't return the sorting machines already taken away, but okay. It's something. All it took was 20 states suing. And I'm sure we can take this guy at his word on this. He seems super honest, what with all the causing miscarriages and junk. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the New Mutants. But heck, you know what? We got more to say about this. Because while this new story is going to be used by certain creeps to assure us we were all overreacting, something we'll touch on later, this actually goes beyond whatever dumb f***ery the president and his kinky postal boss is doing. After all, they aren't promising to stop gutting the USPS entirely, but to just wait until after November to keep doing it. And by doing it, I mean continuing to dismantle 10% of their sorting machines, a way higher amount than ever previously done, and also probably fire more people, and definitely increase service rates and slow down the mail more. And if not these specific ghouls, someone else is going to come around and try. You know, ghouls like the, Postmaster under Obama, who back in 2011 asked Congress for permission to lay off 120,000 employees after having laid off 7,500 employees earlier in the year, and also tried to eliminate delivering directly to your mailbox altogether. All under Obama, who we love, and like, not to sound like an absolute asshole, but if we got these headlines from a certain other president, we would be very alarmed. But to be fair, more balanced-er, that's because this certain other president has very vocally attacked the post office and mail-in voting and enacted postal changes right before the election, and is also really, really bad. But my point here is that while we absolutely should be extremely f***ing concerned about what kind of goblin rat f***ery Trump is going to pull during this election, our country's recent history of the post office's decline is actually an entirely different breed of rat f***ery, dating long before our current president, spanning across the aisle at times, all based on a very dumb expectation for how the post office functions. And if you need it summed up, here's a kinda long quote from that pervert DeJoy during the aforementioned Senate hearing.
The legislation is that we deliver to 161 million addresses 6 days a week. I'm committed to that. I believe that's the strength of the Postal Service, and that we be self-sustaining. Those are the two pieces of legislation that I'm working towards. We are not self-sustained. We have a $10 billion shortfall, and we'll continue to have, over the next 10 years, we'll have a $245 billion shortfall. So we need to, and our management team and our board there is a path that we are planning, okay, with the help of some legislation, with some cost impacts, with some new revenue strategies, and that will help and some pricing freedom from the PRC. We believe we have a plan to do that. But one thing that's not in the plan is not doing anything after the election. It is an ambitious plan because we have $10 billion to bridge. Now, the plan has not been finalized. We have hundreds of initiatives we look like take the Alaska bypass plan, the discussion. That's an item on the table. That's an unfunded mandate. It costs us like $500 million a year. And if I'm not saying what I asked for is all the unfunded mandates, right? That's a way for us to get healthy, pay something for the unfunded mandates. If we just throw $25 billion at us this year and we don't do anything, we'll be back in 2 years. Then maybe we should change the legislation and not make us be self-sustaining. But as a leadership team and a board, that's what our mission is, to be self-sustaining and deliver at a high level of precision. And I'm committed to both.
I might have to explain that a bit. What he's talking about at the start is how while he's suspending cost cutting before the election, he's absolutely going to continue it afterward. Because his mission is for the USPS to be self-sustaining as a business. And one example he gives of something to cut is the Alaska bypass mail system, in which commercial planes are used to ship mail to people in Alaska who are hard to reach. For people in Alaska, it's like a pretty important thing to have. And you can kind of hear in his perv voice this frustration as he explains that in order to remain afloat, he simply has to cut off some large chunks of the raft he is now the captain of. Because he's a business ghoul, you know? That's what they do. They ghoul around. And then he ends it all with this statement, which I'm going to play again.
Then maybe we should change the legislation and not make us be self-sustaining. But as a leadership team and a board, that's what our mission is, to be self-sustaining and deliver at a high level of precision. And I'm committed to both.
Then maybe we should change the legislation and not make us self-sustaining, he adds. And this is a pretty key moment in this hearing, mainly because it goes completely ignored for the rest of it. DeJoy is basically saying, look, unless you want to not make the USPS a self-sustaining business, but rather a branch of the government funded by taxpayers, then I have to treat it like a business and gut it. And he's not technically wrong. And then, I gotta stress this, it goes ignored because they don't actually want that to happen. And to DeJoy's credit, he seems genuinely bothered by the situation he's in and actually defends aspects of the post office later on to our good friend Rand Paul. You know Rand.
I think you could go further and instead of assessing people more of a postal charge if they live 20 miles down a dirt road, simply just have less frequent delivery. And I think that alone would be tolerable. They'd still have personal service, but it would be less frequent. And I think you could make up for a large amount of your shortfall if you went actually below 5 days for some very rural areas.
So Senator, if I may, when I first came here, when I first got this assignment, that was an obvious thing to me. You know, cut back 5 days. 4 days, whatever. And as I've worked through the process and researched and studied the organization, I think the 6-day delivery, the connection that the postal letter carrier has with the American people, that gives us this highly trusted brand, and where the economy is going in the future, I think that is probably our biggest strength to capitalize on.
See, that's Rand casually saying that the USPS could maybe, perhaps, stop delivering 6 days a week to cut costs. Because you gotta cut costs, right? You just gotta. And this is the game they keep playing, where Congress people complain about inefficiencies of the post office, suggest ways to f*** over Americans to cut costs, and kind of deflect everything with, I mean, gosh, it's not like we're gonna stop making you self-sustaining, so what other choice do we have? And they're gonna keep doing this until it's dead. And by the way, when I say complain about the post office, Check this out.
I have to admit that I have felt picked on, not by you, but by the Postal Service recently. And I was glad to hear your explanation that you're having some difficulty with people to deliver the mail in light of the pandemic. I don't think a lot of people understand that. I didn't understand that. But I know that we had a package that we were expecting that was being traced, and we paid extra to have it traced. And we know it sat in the D.C. post office for 11 days before it was delivered to us. I hope that you will take a look at the urban areas. We've been picked on in the rural areas for a long time, but we have some really efficient people out here that are dealing with long distances and doing it very well. But when I go to my post office in D.C., I find that there's only one person working at the counter, and if the person that comes up to the counter needs a box to mail it in, the boxes are not out where people can actually get them. So the person behind the counter has to leave and go get a box. And when they bring the box back, it still has to be sealed and addressed. And they don't move them over to the side to see if they can wait on the next customer. Everybody waits at social distancing. I've been to the post office before during my lunch hour and found that the postal workers decided that was their lunch hour as well. No business lets their employees sit down and eat in front of customers during their lunch hour.
U.S. Senator Mike Enzi, God bless his oily heart, actually used his time at the hearing to air personal complaints with specific post offices that bothered him, and how employees need to eat like a weird old bastard. And again, no one is suggesting a solution, just complaining that it doesn't work, while refusing to make the USPS not self-sustaining, while also encouraging cost-cutting that would continue to make the system work worse, until it's dead and buried. And so the impression you get from this business pervert Gordh DeJoy is that he's not actually like a sinister stooge of the president answering late night calls about the post office, and in fact, at one point says this.
Prior to implementing the changes that you put forth in the postal system, did you discuss those changes, or are there a potential impact on the November election with the president or anyone at the White House? And remind you, you're under oath.
I have never spoken to the president about the Postal Service other than to congratulate me when I accepted the position.
And when you think about who Trump is, you kind of believe that, right? Like, not only has he not talked to Trump about the election, but simply hasn't talked to Trump, like, at all. But then he's followed up with this.
Did you speak or discuss any of these changes with Secretary Mnuchin?
During the discussion and negotiating the note, I told him I'm working on a plan, but I never discussed the changes that I made. I just said I'm working on a plan for.
Gosh, he seems a little more shifty about that one, doesn't he? Because while a lot of people on the internet are gonna totally own us by pointing out that DeJoy wasn't personally appointed by Trump and use that as a reason to tell us all to calm down, and perhaps point out that it was a bipartisan board of governors that hired this obvious pervert sicko, allegedly, DeJoy. See? He's not some stooge, not some lapdog of the president, even though he'd love that, the pervert. Or so I've been told. By myself earlier, with zero evidence. But the detail they might skip over is that right before this sick monster DeJoy was hired, the board was stacked by Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin in order to push them to choose someone specific to Trump's liking. Someone who would look at the current situation at the USPS and do all the business ghoul stuff that would cut down their operation and be pushed around politically. And then one board member named John Barger, who happened to be a Republican donor, pushed for DeJoy in an effort that was outside of the usual selection process and described as highly irregular. So whether or not DeJoy is earnestly trying to help or insidiously bent on destroying democracy, he's there specifically because his efforts will continue to erode the mail, because the GOP and Trump wanted him to be there. So yeah, I guess DeJoy isn't a stooge for Trump, because Mnuchin is actually the stooge for Trump, and DeJoy is the stooge for Mnuchin. It's a stooge chain of command, people! And along with fixing the board in his favor, Mnuchin is now being accused of extorting the USPS on behalf of Trump in order to slow them down and meet specific demands. As Treasury Secretary, he is the guy providing the Postal Service with a line of credit, something he won't do unless he gets a certain amount of loyalty to Trump, but also the GOP in general. Because the GOP has been trying to ruin the post office long before Trump was even a gleam in Republicans' puffy old man eyes. And the motivations actually start getting a little more complicated and diverse when you take a closer look. It's kind of like that movie Smokin' Aces, the one everyone loves, where a bunch of assassins are all trying to kill Jeremy Piven. And everyone has like their own gimmick and reasoning to do it. Only in this case, it's the post office, which is probably, when you really think about it, more important than the star of PCU, when you think about it. So let's start with what Trump wants, separate from his party. You know, besides stealing the election. While a lot of the GOP seem to be happy to turn mail and package delivery over to private companies, Trump might actually be sabotaging the mail not just because of the election, but specifically to get back at Amazon. If you're wondering how compromising the USPS would do that, well, ironically, it turns out that most major retailers and shipping companies use something called last mile delivery to deliver packages in rural areas. This is a service where the USPS finishes the delivery for the private companies. Because unlike the private companies that the GOP want to take over the mail, the USPS actually has the resources to deliver to everyone, regardless of their complexion and or level of being marginalized. In other words, you can't actually just let private companies deliver everyone's mail because, and I really can't stress this enough, the private companies only care about making money and not actually serving everyone. Something lawmakers would know if they dared to live somewhere that wasn't heavily gated. But anywho, before the hiring of DeJoy, Trump was actually pushing the previous Postmaster General to raise the fees charged for these last mile deliveries, most likely as a way to get back at Jeff Bezos. And while that sounds like Trump is trying to bolster the post office, he's actually withholding aid from them unless they do this, saying they need to raise their prices for packages by 4 times the current amount, a plan that the director of retail studies at Columbia University Business School called a, and Cody quotes, about as catastrophically stupid an idea that anyone could ever imagine. Because if they did raise their prices, it would most likely screw over small businesses and cause Amazon to simply extend their own delivery trucks, ultimately screwing over the post office as people would resort to cheaper private companies. In other words, Trump is applying the extent of his business savvy by strong-arming the post office into making a really stupid power play that would tank them, much like the result of any good Trump business. And it sounds like DeJoy is going to do that for him. You know, because of the extortion and all of that. So whether or not Trump is tanking the post office because of poor business knowledge, or because he's illogically afraid of mail-in ballots that might actually help his chances at being reelected, whichever reason, it's most certainly stupid. Because he's stupid and reckless and has no idea what he's doing. In Smokin' Aces terms, he's those redneck Nazis played by Blob and Captain Kirk, you know the ones. Because like all of us, you've definitely watched that movie recently and know the references. Ah, dang, this just in from weeks ago.
They want $25 billion for the post office. Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. Now, in the meantime, they aren't getting there. By the way, those are just 2 items. But if they don't get those 2 items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting because they're not equipped to have it.
Well, there you go. It turns out the specific stupid reason at the moment for sabotaging the post office is, in fact, to also sabotage the election and, by extension, democracy. Because of course that's the reason. Like, how weird is it that Trump not only is against mail-in voting, but also ballot drop boxes as well? What a weird coincidence that all the ways that help people vote easier are all bad and wrong, according to the GOP, who are also trying to stop these for absolutely fabricated reasons. Because not only have ballot drop boxes been used for years in certain states, but they're usually handled with extra security, under camera surveillance, collected daily by both Republican and Democratic representatives, and audited for signs of fraud to be extra sure. Anyway, the president sucks. He sucks and is wrong all of the time. We know this. But Trump is, in theory, a fleeting threat. I mean, unless the election goes, terribly wrong, but like what are the odds of that? Like what are the odds? Someone just imagine what the odds are of that. Like what are the Vegas odds of the Dems completely whiffing it, or of Trump finding a way to drag it out and sabotage the election? And like the Democrats will be like, they'll tweet something about how it's terrible and someone should do something about it. Like really imagine that. Really imagine the election. Anyway, it's quite important to talk about the larger, more organized effort to dismantle the Postal Service, one that is specifically coming from the GOP. For that, we have to go back to 2006, when the Republican-led Congress passed the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act, which was then signed into law by Ellen confidant and known painter, and that's it, George W. Bush. Now, to be fair, and also balanced, the rise of electronic mail, or electro-Ms as we call them today, created a situation where there was less need for the post office and a steady decline began in the early 2000s. But to be even more fair, and even more balancer, and bold, and beautiful, and ready for love, this was only part of why the post office began to hemorrhage money. But to be the most fair, the fairest, and the king of balancedness, the establishment of post offices is like in the Constitution, and nowhere in that document, or like the logic of the world we live in, does it say that mail delivery has to make money. And it's weird that we would expect it to. And it wasn't always like this. It wasn't created as a money-making entity, and was changed to one way later. The United States Post Office was founded during the Revolutionary War. Have you heard of it? And it was established as a way for businesses and people to communicate without the interference of the British, who we weren't too keen on at the time. It wasn't put in place as a bonus feature to America or a cool money-making scheme, but to empower the people in the face of tyranny. Kinda seems weird that people in power want to get rid of it when you think about it from a historical perspective, you know? Anyhoosers, back then the old PO was all the rage with the old-timies and kinda sorta helped establish America. A thing one could argue wasn't the best idea and led to the suffering of countless not white people, but still, we got the Grand Canyon and other junk, so that's pretty neat, I guess. The point here, though, is that it wasn't a partisan issue up until the early 1800s, when our very old and racist president's favorite other old and racist president, Andrew Jackson, used the postal system to withhold political material from his rivals, specifically abolitionist mailers, which his Postmaster General instructed Southern postmasters to withhold unless specifically requested. What a novel idea to use the mail system to maintain a system of racism from the current president's favorite guy. Super coincidence there. Side note, isn't it weird that Trump and cohorts will claim to be the party of Lincoln and also claim that the Southern strategy where the party switch doesn't exist, but also Andrew Jackson, a Democrat, is his favorite president? I don't know, kind of weird. Anyway, this Andrew Jackson politicizing and manipulating the post office so as to curb the movement to abolish slavery was intertwined with something called the spoils system, a practice created by Jackson where civil service jobs were awarded to the people who supported whatever party was in power. You know, cronyism. Totally not familiar? Are any of those words that I am saying, of course. Now, this wasn't the post office we know today, but rather the United States Post Office Department, a predecessor to the USPS and cabinet department that was paid for by the government to create before largely making a profit. Not that it mattered if it made money. It was only until the postal strike of 1970 and our boy Richard Nixon, seen here in his official presidential portrait, did the United States Post Office Department turn into the United States Postal Service. This was via the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970, which transformed the department into a government-owned corporation expected to make a profit. A totally smart idea that certainly didn't create any future problems or weird misunderstandings about what the post office is. So while Jackson set up the wonders of abusing the mail, this was probably the most damning moment in the USPS history. This is that Jar Jar giving Palpatine emergency powers over the Senate, and then everyone just clapping because I guess that's how they vote in Star Wars. It's not a great film. Anyway, let's watch the whole clip of that, even though we don't actually need to.
Misa proposed that the Senate give immediately emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor.
Fucking nonsense. So going into 2006, just a year after a young Darth Vader shouted, "But from my point of view, the Jedi are evil," and we were in a situation where the post office, now recognized as a corporation for some reason, was naturally on a decline, but still extremely important. And instead of creating a way to keep it afloat during the age of Electro-Ms, the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act served as a way to step even harder on the post office's neck, specifically by requiring the Postal Service to prepay retiree health benefits, the cost of which adding up to roughly $5 billion a year. Now, to be clear, this is something that no other federal agency is required to do, and by 2012 caused the USPS to begin defaulting on the payments, the grand total of which has grown to $47.2 billion. In their fact sheet about this, the USPS specifically pointed to the 2006 law as the reason their current business model had become unsustainable. In other words, we fucking loan sharked them. Instead of giving the post office a bailout, something we have no problem doing with other entities, we put them in so much debt that they can never get out from under it. And now, we're literally removing mailboxes from cities like we're Tony fucking Soprano strip mining an insolvent business. But it's not Robert Patrick's canoe shop, it's the goddamn post office. And you should be very angry about this. In a country where we declared predatory ass banks as being too big to fail, the GOP can't muster even a fraction of the same passion for one of the most essential services this country has to offer. America is diseased. F*** it. God. I'm gonna get tickets to the New Mutants. I do not give a shit. I'm gonna lick all of the armrests. What makes this all very frustrating is that the conservative side on this issue is, at the very best, not lying but extremely dumb. Or, to be as charitable as possible, ignorant. You might hear someone say, "Well, hey now, I thought you liberals were all about progress, and now you want to keep this outdated mail delivery system?" Or maybe they'll say, "Oh, the post office is obsolete and losing money. We don't need it anymore because we have Electro-M. Let Amazon handle package delivery." I mean, they probably won't say it in such a dumb straw man voice, but this is the popular argument posed from the right. And it either comes from people who A, don't understand that the USPS not only handles a lot of Amazon deliveries, but is the only option for lower class citizens and has access to neighborhoods that private delivery companies don't, or B, are infected with the absolutely dumb idea that the post office needs to make money. A thing I keep bringing up and can't stress enough isn't the point of the post office. Like, if you learned that our public highway maintenance system or the city's water and power department wasn't turning a profit, you wouldn't conclude that we should stop having that thing. The government's job isn't to make money. It's not a business. We're not employees. We're not getting a cut of profits. It's there to spend money, our money, that it takes from us. So going back to Mr. DeJoy's statement about how he wants to provide a greater focus on the core aspects of our business for future success, well, that should really alarm you. Because while it seems like he fundamentally doesn't understand the purpose of his job, the GOP has been slowly transforming the Postal Service into a business for quite some time now. Because that's how they want it to be, even though that's not what it exists for. And the people doing this either don't understand that or are up to something a lot more nefarious. It means that they are in a position of power and wealth and do not value the basic needs of their citizens because those aren't the same needs as theirs. And in the worst case, they're actively undermining those needs in an effort to maintain their power and continue to keep the most helpless people in a perpetual state of struggle. They are not your friend and they need to be stopped. The very core of their ideology is caustic to the well-being of our post office. That's why we gotta buy their merch or call our Congress people or governors and be like, hey, no, you stop. No, you stop it. And they'll tweet back to us that we should do something about this. Hey, pass it on, everyone. Thanks, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, a state, for telling us that we need to tell other people to fund the USPS. Way to fix the problem. Hey, thanks, AOC, for challenging the president to a grade-off to fund the post office. You slay, you. This is all very helpful and productive. Hey, thanks for the hashtag, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Thanks for the fun mail puns, Senator Chuck Schumer. But okay, I guess you're now doing the absolute bare minimum action. So thumbs way up. And for people wondering, like, what do you want them to do about it? I don't know. Why not actually subpoena DeJoy instead of just requesting him to testify with stern tweets worded like the joke section of a USPS coloring book? And subpoena the president, perhaps, maybe. And like, if he rejects the subpoenas, which he will, arrest him. Something Congress can do, but just hasn't done for a century, and maybe should perhaps bring back. Or not, because apparently executive privilege might veto that. But they could still arrest DeJoy, but won't. He showed up. We did a whole thing about it. Because holding someone in contempt of Congress apparently requires a years-long legal battle. So I guess let's just go back to the pun system we've been using. But hey, I guess, DeJoy did agree to testify. He was there, after all. So there's no need to think about or improve this system whatsoever. Feeling super empowered right now. Look, the terrible truth here is that things might have to get worse before they get better. Hopefully without society crumbling so hard that we all gain a new appreciation for the post office, but frankly, that's not off the table. Like that film none of us watched. There's a lot of stuff we need to do to fix this, including but not limited to completely changing the way this country thinks about the post office, and also capitalism. For example, during the Great Depression, we realized that maybe we should perhaps not trust banks. And so as a response to this, the United States introduced the U.S. Postal Savings System. It was a system designed to provide banking for immigrants and folks in the lower classes, but actually having post offices double as banks. Once World War II ended, banks became able to compete with the postal savings interest rates, and the service was quickly reversed. And maybe it shouldn't have been. Along with providing delivery for medication and bills and greeting cards and the goddamn Amazon packages, the USPS is one of the only institutions that is available to otherwise isolated parts of the country. And using these already embedded post offices as a banking service would provide much needed support for otherwise underserved and lower class communities. Often communities of color, communities where banks have been replaced with predatory lenders designed to keep them in a state of dependency and poverty. In a country where 28% of the people don't have bank accounts, where American debt is expected to exceed $80 billion, all of which go to banks, the idea of creating a federal banking system within the post office wouldn't just save the mail, and makes like a lot of sense, or at the very least is something worth talking about, and something that a few politicians have been pushing for. Doesn't it just click in your head as a very obvious solution to a lot of problems specifically hurting the lower class? The institutions are in place. It's an extremely practical solution to both the waning of the post office and a lack of access to banks in places like Appalachia, or any low-income neighborhood, or just any place anywhere, because that's where post offices are, unlike banks. Let's put a bank in every post office, because it's a wacky idea. Wowee, Ben, who looked at this extremely good idea and threw up his arms and very smartly was like, well, why don't we put mailboxes in banks and shoes on our heads? Geez, what a silly idea to bank in post offices. A thing that is literally done throughout the world, in many countries, but not ours. What a pie in the sky idea that France, Japan, and China all do at full service, but we don't for some dumb piss reason. Like, holy shit. I know this isn't a Ben Shapiro video, and we've done like, I don't know, 10 or 50 of those already. But this single tweet Ben made, completely ignorant of the historical context of postal banking or the fact that banks aren't available in a lot of areas, it sure makes me wonder why anyone would ever take him seriously as a political voice. Like, hey Ben, are you lying or just don't understand the conversation? Either way, maybe you should shut the ever-living f*** up. Right, Ben? You should shut the ever-living f*** up, Ben? That's what you're gonna do, right? Oh, shucks, he's still going. So Ben, the calm boy who uses facts to destroy our panic over the post office, very calm boy, points out that the US Post Office has been losing money for 14 straight years and still has enough liquidity to operate halfway into 2021, and therefore, we should calm down with our conspiracy theories about Trump and the GOP trying to undermine the election and the Postal Service, and perhaps not look too hard into it. You know, like calm down. No need to subtract the 14 years he mentioned that the USPS has been losing money from the current date of 2020, coming up with the number 2006, also known as the year that the GOP created the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act that I just told you about. You know, the one that put them into debt for nearly $50 billion. But Ben is too busy with facts to do things like math, or think critically, or let's be honest, honestly, about how maybe it's still a big f***ing deal that the post office will run out of operating money in less than a year from now. He's got other things to do, such as totally hand-waving any fears that the president and GOP are going after the election as a conspiracy theory. It's the left's QAnon, folks. Everyone calm down. You know, some of those photos of mailboxes being taken away or locked up are fake. And therefore, everything is fake, except for the mailboxes that were actually taken away. And did I mention that we should calm down? I mean, the only other evidence that the president might be trying to undermine mail-in voting is nothing more than the president saying that he wants to undermine mail-in voting out loud with his stupid f***ing mouth. And that's just like Trump being Trump, am I right? You can't like listen to the president's words, you know? Like, who even does that? Everyone just calm down and do nothing, and especially calm down. And this is gonna keep going. The Ben Shapiros of the world, the lying twerps, are gonna be spending a considerable amount of time assuring us that we're being paranoid and overreacting, and it's really not that bad. They'll be sharing articles like this one, and most of it is a series of fact checks that have very little to do with the current situation with the post office, and begins with the very reassuring words, yes, you should be concerned about the future of the United States Postal Service, but the whole sky isn't falling quite yet. and has the headline saying, hey, don't panic, but also we seriously need to fund the post office ASAP. Because nothing in this article disproves anything I've already said. It just words it as being sorta kinda not as big of a deal. And I can't stress enough how much of this damage control, the it's no big deal bullshit, we're going to get in the coming months, where very dumb people who think they're being very smart share a few false stories about mailboxes getting taken away as proof that this is totally not worth worrying about. Pointing out that the post office won't be broke until 2021, and therefore we don't have to worry is like saying, sure, the lower decks of the ship are filling with water, but it's not like we're totally drowning right now, so don't panic. You look stupid with how much you're panicking. And just go ahead and apply this to a lot of things like climate change and income inequality and the president continuing to joke about more than 2 terms and healthcare and coronavirus and Nazis and all the things that GOP and centrists and Democrats too all love to say is no big deal until it suddenly becomes a really big goddamn motherfucking deal. It's like that phrase, about the slowly boiling frog. Don't panic, frog. Those bubbles are small right now. Our dear sweet friend Ben's cat dick tweets really sum it up. That the entire argument from conservatives in terms of the post office is based around some of the biggest Mad Hatter logic. And when offered any solution, they will reject it without giving it a moment's thought. Because deep down, they've always wanted to privatize the post office, to finish what Nixon started. That's just one of their goals. And why they're holding the USPS up to these weird money-making expectations and hand-waving any solutions that don't get us to that one result. It's why when Trump hilariously tweets, "Save the post office," while actively killing it, he doesn't think that's what he's doing. He thinks by cutting costs and making it less effective, he's saving it. Because it has to make money, folks, like a business would. And if it doesn't, then it just shouldn't exist. And to them, the post office has no use outside of that goal. It's a service solely designed to assist the lower and middle class American people, and therefore has so little value to them that they can't even understand why people would be angry that it's missing. And that same thing goes for some Democrats or moderates or any politician so out of touch that they don't understand what's at stake. It's important to note that neither side is perfect here. And as I already pointed out, Obama also seemed to think the post office was an entity designed to make a profit, but also did try to specifically relieve some of their debt from the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act. So that's good, but also not nearly enough. So it's mainly conservatives, many of which are now tossing out the idea of handing off our fucking election mail to UPS or FedEx. It's a great idea, the Lincoln Project. You're one of the good ones with the good ideas. This is not the solution. Because, and again, I really can't stress it enough, these companies don't care about democracy or getting everyone their ballots or even reaching everyone because their entire purpose is to make money, which is fine, I guess, but absolutely shouldn't be the purpose of a United States post office. Turning our ballots over to private companies is exactly what the GOP wants to happen and probably why they're doing all of this in the first place. Just ask Veterans for Biden, who very correctly point out that people's lives literally depend on the USPS. Very good point, Veterans for Biden, who I agree with on that. So what can we do? I mean, I know I just mocked it, but honestly, we really should buy their merch. Some of it is pretty sexy. And also, I guess we can hashtag about it, buy stamps, and be as loud as we possibly can with our voices that, quite frankly, might fall on deaf ears. But since a lot of that isn't going to do much, we mostly need to pay attention to the liars, to the people pushing to screw us over, and remember who those people are, and not vote for them, and tell them every day that they can get absolutely f***ed and eat all of our shit and our piss, garnish our shit with our piss, and then slurp it up. from Tupperware, the old Tupperware, not the new good Tupperware, and never shut up about our support for the post office, and perhaps support bringing back a postal banking system, and making the post office not a corporation again, because it isn't one. And we shouldn't be calm. We should continue to be very uncalm and vocal about our concerns and make videos for the internet about it, where we talk about how much bullshit it is and also incorporate clips from Star Wars. Here's another one.
Someone to see you, honey. Jedi by the looks of him.
Obi-Wan.
Hello, Dex.
Absolutely horrifying and necessary. It hurts the pacing of this video, but we did it anyway. So while a lot of these ghouls and people telling us to calm down will be Trumpists or Republicans, which are kind of the same thing, some of them won't be. And it shouldn't matter. This isn't partisan. It's an attack on everyone, on the country, and democracy. And it's not enough that they're waiting until after the election, because this has been happening for a while now. We should have been outraged and angry and not calm about this years before Trump. The USPS has been under attack for decades by stupid people who are degrading it because of a flawed ideology. The post office has been on the ropes for a while, but amazingly have managed to stay upright. And we need to join them in the fight, refuse to let it die, even after years of attacks and delays and reshoots and a Disney merger. The New Mutants is finally here, folks, in theaters that you shouldn't go to, unlike the post office, which you should go to, wearing a mask. And make sure to safely vote. Information on those steps in the description of this video, which is over now. Play us out, Postal Service.
I've got a cupboard with cans of food, filtered water and pictures of you. I'm not coming out till this is all over. And I'm looking through the glass where the light bends at the cracks. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, pretending the echoes belong to someone. Someone I used to know. And we become silhouettes when our bodies finally go. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. To walk through the empty streets, feel something constant under my feet. But all the news reports recommended that I stay indoors. 'Cause the air outside will make our cells divide at an alarming rate, till our shells simply cannot hold all our insides in, and that's when we'll explode. It won't be a pretty sight, and we become silhouettes when our bodies finally go. Bum, 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 bum. And it's the Postal Service, but it's quarantine themed on account of the situation. So
Hi, very hot today. Like and subscribe the video and then the channel. Check out our patreon.com/some more news and our podcast, even more news. Other links too, maybe. I don't know. Bye.